In a school where cliques and stereotypes ruled, where stepping beyond the norm invited scorn, one boy hid a secret no one suspected. Jamal Duke didn't chase attention. He was the kid who faded into the crowd, dismissed by peers, underestimated by all. But beneath his quiet exterior burned a passion, fierce and alive, honed alone in shadows far from judging eyes. Then came the annual talent show, a stage where dreams soared or shattered before a restless audience. Jamal, defying expectations, signed up. Not for applause, but to play a piano piece that would defy every label pinned on him. Whispers spread as the night drew near. Jamal at the keys? He's out of his depth. This will be a disaster. Yet he stood firm, unshaken, his determination growing with every doubt cast his way. No one could predict what was coming. When he finally played, the school would never be the same. This isn't just about music. It's about courage rising against disbelief, about talent breaking through walls of bias. What unfolded that night didn't merely quiet the skeptics, it sparked a change that echoed beyond the stage. It's a tale of grit, of hidden brilliance, of moments that rewrite who we think we know. Comment below, where in the world are you watching from? And make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. Jamal Duke's world was small but rich with echoes of the past. In this modest apartment, where memories clung to every corner, he found solace at the keys. The keyboard was old, its sound tinny, but to Jamal, it was a lifeline, a tether to the woman who had taught him to play. Grandma Ruth had been a jazz singer once, her voice a balm to weary souls. She'd traded the spotlight for family, pouring her love into Jamal instead. "Music is your voice, Jamal," she'd say, her hands warm over his. "Let it speak when words fail." Those lessons lingered, even after she was gone, her presence woven into every note he played. At age 7, Jamal perched beside Grandma Ruth, giggling as she guided his hands. "Feel the rhythm, baby," she'd say, her voice rich with encouragement, her laughter a melody of its own. Those moments were magic, a world where only they existed, bound by the music they created together. Though she was gone, her spirit lingered in every chord, pushing him to dream bigger, to believe in the power of his own voice. 2 years had passed since she'd left, but her legacy lived on in Jamal's quiet determination, who is now 13 years old. Music was his refuge, his way of keeping her close. And soon, it would be his way of stepping into the light. At school, Jamal was a ghost, drifting through the noise without leaving a trace. The community was diverse, but tension simmered beneath the surface, cliques forming along invisible lines. Jamal didn't belong to any of them. With his headphones as a shield, he tuned out the chatter, content in his solitude. Tyler and Paul ruled the social scene, their voices carrying over the din. They didn't notice Jamal, and he preferred it that way. His world was elsewhere, in the music that played in his ears, in the notes he'd play when he got home. The school itself was a patchwork of ambitions and struggles, its walls plastered with posters preaching unity, though the reality was messier. Cultural events were celebrated, but whispers of prejudice lingered, shaping how students saw each other, and themselves. Jamal navigated it all with quiet resilience, his passion for music a secret armor. The annual talent show was a tradition, a chance for students to step beyond their labels and shine. Principal Diana, ever the optimist, beamed as she addressed the crowd. "This is your chance to shine, to show us who you are. Sign up, let's make it unforgettable." Her words hung in the air, a challenge and an invitation. In the back, Jamal shifted, his heart pounding. He dreamed of playing for others, of honoring Grandma Ruth's memory, but doubt gnawed at him. What if they laughed? What if he failed? The music teacher, Mr. Davis, watched the students mill about, his love for music tempered by the school's dwindling resources. He believed in potential, even when it was hidden. Jamal caught his eye, and something in that glance steadied him. Jamal approaches the sign-up sheet, pen in hand. With a deep breath, Jamal scribbled his name on the list. It was done. No turning back. As he stepped away, a mix of fear and resolve settled in his chest. This was his chance, to prove himself, to let the music speak. Walking home that day, Jamal couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming. Whether it was triumph or trial, he wasn't sure. But one thing was certain, he was ready to face it, with Grandma Ruth's voice echoing in his heart. The school hallway buzzes with the shuffle of sneakers and locker doors slamming shut. A bulletin board stands against the wall, the talent show sign-up sheet pinned to it like a flag. Tyler and Paul, 2 boys from Jamal's grade, approach it with lazy strides, their eyes skimming the list of names. Tyler's gaze snagged on Jamal's name like a burr catching on a sleeve. There it was, written in that careful, deliberate script, Jamal Duke, piano. It didn't compute for Tyler, didn't match the box he'd stuffed Jamal into. Piano was for kids with private lessons and polished shoes, not for someone like Jamal, or so Tyler thought. Jamal Duke? Piano? What's he gonna do, rap over it? Tyler said, his tone dripping with mockery. Paul didn't miss a step. Yeah, this'll be a train wreck, he shot back, and their laughter spilled out, loud and jagged, bouncing off the lockers. To them, Jamal was a punchline, quiet, reserved, the kid who didn't fit their narrow definition of talent. They didn't know about the late nights Jamal spent hunched over his keyboard, the melodies he coaxed out of worn keys. They didn't see the hours, the heart, the way music stitched him together when everything else pulled him apart. All they saw was a chance to tear him down before he even got started. The cafeteria hums with life, trays clatter, voices overlap, chairs scrape against the floor. Jamal sits alone at a table in the corner, his lunch tray untouched, headphones resting around his neck like a shield. Tyler loomed over Jamal's table, leaning in close, his voice carrying that fake curiosity that always preceded a jab. Hey, Jamal, you seriously think you can play piano? Stick to something you're good at, like nothing, he said, letting the words hang there, heavy and cruel. The air shifts. Laughter ripples out from nearby tables, heads turning, eyes glinting with amusement. Jamal lifts his gaze, steady and unshaken. You'll see, he said, his voice low but firm, a quiet promise wrapped in 2 simple words. The cafeteria noise swallowed it up, but it landed like a stone in Tyler's smug little world. For a split second, Tyler hesitated, caught off guard by the steel in Jamal's stare, but he brushed it off with a scoff. Yeah, right. Can't wait to see you crash and burn, he said, swaggering off with Paul, their laughter trailing like exhaust. The focus narrows. Jamal sits still, his jaw tight, his hands resting on the table, fingers curling slightly as if itching for the keys. Jamal wasn't blind to what this was. The taunts weren't new, just the latest verse in a song he'd heard too many times. It wasn't about piano, not really. It was about the assumptions they draped over him, the weight of their disbelief. But Jamal had something they didn't expect, a fire, banked and steady, ready to flare. He'd signed up for the talent show not to prove them wrong, but to prove himself right, to let the music speak when words never could. And in that noisy, crowded room, with the echoes of their mockery still hanging in the air, Jamal made a choice. He wouldn't just play. He'd make them hear him. Ever been underestimated or judged? Drop your story in the comments, we'd love to hear it. Jamal's room was a sanctuary, but tonight it felt like a battleground. The keyboard, usually his refuge, had become a stubborn opponent. Amazing Grace, the hymn Grandma Ruth had loved, should have flowed like water, but the notes kept tangling, refusing to bend to his will. He'd chosen to arrange it himself, weaving in the jazz flourishes she'd taught him, but the blend wasn't coming together. Not yet. The talent show loomed, just days away, and doubt crept in like a thief, stealing his confidence note by note. Jamal exhales sharply, his hands hovering over the keys, then drops them to his lap. He leans back, staring at the ceiling, the weight of expectation pressing down on him. He could almost hear Tyler's sneer, the laughter rippling through the cafeteria. Stick to something you're good at, like nothing. The words stung, but they weren't the worst of it. What gnawed at Jamal was the fear that maybe, just maybe, they were right. Maybe he wasn't ready. Maybe he'd falter under the spotlight, his tribute to Grandma Ruth crumbling into silence. But then, like a balm, the memory came. Grandma Ruth, her voice a warm hum, her hands dancing over the keys. "Feel it, baby," she'd say, her smile as bright as the sun streaming through the window. "Let the music speak." She'd shown him how to take the hymn's simple melody and make it soar, how to weave in the bluesy notes that made it ache and uplift all at once. In those moments, music wasn't just sound, it was emotion, story, soul. The flashback lingers. Grandma Ruth places Jamal's small hands on the keys, guiding him through the first few notes. He giggles, delighted, as the melody begins to take shape under their shared touch. Jamal had laughed then, the joy of creation bubbling up inside him. With her, music was magic, a language they spoke together. Even now, years later, he could feel her presence in the room, her voice whispering through the silence, "Let it speak, Jamal. Let it speak for you." Jamal sits up straighter, his eyes softening as he touches the keys again, this time with reverence rather than frustration. Something shifted. The memory wasn't just comfort, it was a reminder. This wasn't about perfection, it was about heart. He closed his eyes, took a breath, and let his fingers find the keys again. The notes came slower this time, but they flowed, each one carrying a piece of him, a piece of her. School had a way of amplifying doubt. The hallway was a gauntlet, and today, it felt sharper than ever. Jamal kept his gaze forward, but the words found him anyway. A student's voice rises above the din, loud and dismissive. "Jamal on piano? That's a joke, right?" Another voice joins in, sharp with a smirk. "He'll crash and burn. No way he pulls this off." The group laughs, the sound harsh and grating. Jamal didn't stop, didn't turn. He'd heard it all before, the disbelief, the assumptions. But each word was a pebble added to the weight on his shoulders. He clenched his fists, his steps quickening. Let them talk. He'd show them. He had to. Their doubt was fuel now, burning alongside his own. But deep down, a sliver of fear remained. What if they were right? What if, when the moment came, the music failed him? Back in Jamal's room, the afternoon light filtering through the window. Music sheets are spread across his bed, the keyboard waiting. Jamal sits down, flipping through the pages, when something slips out, a small, folded note, yellowed with age. Jamal's breath caught as he unfolded the note. The handwriting was unmistakable, Grandma Ruth's looping script, steady and sure. "Let the music speak for you, baby." The words blurred as his eyes welled up. She'd tucked it into his music sheets long ago, a quiet gift he'd forgotten until now. Jamal holds the note, his fingers tracing the letters. He closes his eyes, the weight of her love settling over him like a warm blanket. In that moment, the doubt, the fear, the mocking. It all faded. This was why he was doing it. Not for Tyler, not for the school, but for her. For himself. To let the music say what words never could. Jamal sets the note beside the keyboard, his hand steady now. He begins to play Amazing Grace again, but this time, the notes flow effortlessly, the melody rich with emotion, the jazz flourishes weaving in like a heartbeat. The music filled the room, spilling out into the hallway, wrapping around him like an embrace. It was perfect, not because it was flawless, but because it was true. Every note carried her spirit, his struggle, his hope. And for the first time, Jamal knew he was ready. The talent show was no longer a test. It was a stage for his truth. And when he sat down at that piano, he wouldn't just play, he'd let the music speak. The auditorium was electric, buzzing with that raw, untamed energy only a room full of teenagers can muster. The talent show had kicked off with a bang, a trio of girls twirling through a dance routine that was more heart than finesse, their sequined skirts catching the light as they stumbled. A few whoops and claps followed, but the mood shifted fast when a kid with a guitar took the stage, his voice cracking on every high note like glass under pressure. The crowd wasn't shy, laughter cut through the applause, sharp and unforgiving. They were hungry for something real, something to grab hold of, but it hadn't come yet. Everyone was waiting, whether they knew it or not. The air crackled with possibility, a storm brewing just beneath the surface. And then, the moment arrived. Behind that curtain, Jamal was a bundle of nerves, his heart thumping so loud it drowned out the chatter beyond. His fingers gripped his grandmother's note like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "Let the music speak for you, baby," it read, words scribbled in her shaky hand, a piece of her he could still hold onto. He peeked through the gap, catching glimpses of the audience, a girl twirling her hair, a boy whispering something that sparked a laugh. It was a world he wasn't sure he belonged in, but he was here now, and there was no turning back. He could feel the clock ticking, each second tightening the knot in his stomach. But that note, it was his anchor, her voice in his ear, telling him he was enough. He squared his shoulders, ready or not. Next, Jamal Duke on piano. The MC's announcement hit the room like a spark, and the reaction was instant, a wave of snickers rolling from the back to the front. Jamal stepped out, his sneakers scuffing the stage, and there it was, Tyler's voice, loud and smug from the front row. "This'll be quick." The words landed like a punch, drawing chuckles from the seats nearby. The crowd was a jury, and their verdict was already in, or so they thought. Jamal didn't let it show, but those laughs cut deep. He'd heard them before, in hallways, in glances, but tonight was different. Tonight, he had a chance to rewrite the story. Jamal settles onto the piano bench, the wood groaning under him. The instrument is weathered, its finish chipped, but the keys gleam, ready. He rests his hands, takes a breath, and shuts his eyes. The room fades. Then, the music begins. The first note slipped out, soft as a sigh, trembling in the air like it wasn't sure it belonged. Amazing Grace started small, hesitant, a melody tiptoeing into the silence. Jamal's fingers hovered, uncertain, the weight of every stair pressing down. But then, he remembered. Grandma Ruth at her old upright, her hands guiding his, showing him how to make the keys sing. The note steadied, grew, and something clicked. This wasn't just a song anymore, it was a heartbeat. And there it was, all the shift. What started shaky turned bold, the melody soaring with a mix of grace and grit. Jamal wove in those jazz flourishes, little sparks of magic his grandmother had passed down, and the piano came alive. The crowd felt it too. Paul sat up, mouth open like he'd seen a ghost, a good one. Tyler fidgeted, his cool cracking, eyes locked on the stage. The room was still now, every note pulling them in, wrapping them up in something they hadn't expected. He was lost in it now, the music a current carrying him home. Each chord was a piece of him, his quiet nights practicing, his grief, his fight. It spilled out, raw and real, and the audience couldn't look away. This was no kid fumbling through a tune, this was a story, told in every press of his fingers. That last note hung there, a thread of gold stretching across the silence. And then, bam, the place erupted. Applause crashed through the room, starting slow, then roaring like thunder. Kids leapt up, cheering, whistling, their hands a blur of motion. Paul was on his feet, clapping like his life depended on it, a grin plastered across his face. Tyler stood too, slower, his hands meeting in a reluctant rhythm, his eyes narrowed, but clapping all the same. Jamal stood there, soaking it in, the noise a tidal wave he'd never dreamed of riding. It wasn't just clapping, it was belief, loud and clear. He'd taken their snickers and turned them into this, a room on its feet, united by what he'd given them. As he walked off, the cheers followed, a victory march he'd earned note by note. Backstage felt like a different world, quieter, softer, a place to exhale. Jamal barely had time to process the roar of the crowd before Mr. Davis was there, his hand clapping Jamal's shoulder with a warmth that said more than words ever could. "Jamal, that was extraordinary," Mr. Davis said, his voice thick with pride. "I've rarely seen a student command a room like that. I'd love to mentor you, maybe even get you into the orchestra. You've got something special, kid." Jamal nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Thanks, Mr. Davis. That means a lot. But I'm keeping the piano too." His voice was steady, a quiet declaration. The piano wasn't just an instrument, it was his tether. To Grandma Ruth, to the music that had carried him this far. Mr. Davis's grin widened, respect flickering in his gaze. Wouldn't expect anything less, he said, and in that moment, Jamal knew he'd found an ally. It was more than an offer, it was recognition. For the first time, Jamal felt seen, not as the quiet kid in the back, but as a musician, an artist. And yet, even in this victory, he held tight to his roots, to the piano that had been his voice when words failed. The auditorium exit, where the crowd spills out into the night. Tyler and Paul weren't hard to spot, they stuck out like sore thumbs, their bravado dialed down to a whisper. They'd been loud before, all sneers and snide remarks, but now, they looked smaller, like the wind had been knocked out of them. As Jamal passed, Paul cleared his throat, the sound awkward in the open air. That was actually good, he muttered, the words half swallowed but clear enough. Tyler nodded, almost imperceptibly. Yeah, didn't expect that, he added, his voice gruff, like admitting it cost him something. Jamal paused, just for a beat, and gave them a faint smile. Thanks, he said, simple and steady. No gloating, no bitterness, just grace. He kept walking, leaving them to chew on their words. The look on Tyler and Paul, their faces a mix of confusion and reluctant admiration. They exchange a glance, the silence between them saying what they couldn't. It wasn't an apology, but it was close enough. Jamal didn't need their approval, he'd already won something bigger. Still, hearing it, seeing the shift in their eyes, felt like a quiet victory. The kind that didn't need fanfare. Walking home that night, Jamal felt different. Not in a loud, triumphant way, but in the quiet, steady way that comes from knowing you've done something true. The streetlights flickered above him, their glow soft and steady, lighting his path. With each step, he replayed the performance in his mind, the notes, the silence, the applause, but more than that, he felt Grandma Ruth beside him, Jamal's hand brushes the folded note in his pocket, a touchstone. He doesn't need to read it again, the words are etched in his heart. He could almost hear her voice, that rich, warm hum, let the music speak for you, baby. And it had. It had spoken louder than any doubt, any taunt. Jamal's chest swelled with a pride that wasn't just his own, it was hers too. He'd honored her, not with perfection, but with heart. And that was enough. As he turned the corner toward home, Jamal knew this was just the beginning. The talent show was over, but his journey was unfolding. And whatever came next, he'd face it with the same quiet strength that had carried him this far. Here, in the heart of his home, Jamal played. Not for a crowd, not for praise, but for the sheer joy of it. The music poured out, rich and deep, carrying echoes of every hurdle he'd leaped. His parents watched, their silence louder than any cheer. This was their boy, the one who'd turned whispers into melodies, who'd taken every doubt thrown his way and shaped it into something pure. Jamal Duke didn't just play a song that night at the talent show, he rewrote the story others had pinned on him. In a world that loves its boxes, its quick judgments, his music broke free. It wasn't just notes, it was proof. Proof that talent, when you let it breathe, can cross any line, silence any sneer. He didn't just hush the skeptics, he showed them a truth they'd missed, he was more than they'd ever imagined. This was his win. Not the spotlight, not the claps, but this, sitting here, knowing he'd kept Grandma Ruth's fire alive, knowing he'd held fast to who he was when hiding would have been simpler. He'd faced the stares, the jabs, the heavy weight of being underestimated, and he'd risen above. Not flawless, but fierce. And in that fierceness, he'd found his song. As that final note hung in the air, Jamal knew this was just the start. The talent show was behind him, but his path stretched ahead, each step a testament to the strength he'd built. He'd meet whatever came with that same steady spirit. Because this wasn't about showing them up, it was about showing himself he'd been right all along. Jamal's story tells us something big, in a world fast to judge, it's your heart, your grit, your truth that tears down walls. It's not where you're from or what they think, it's what burns in you. Sometimes, one song's all it takes to shift the whole picture. If you love stories that celebrate resilience, showcase jaw-dropping skill, and deliver twists that stun, hit that like button and subscribe to Mr. Morgan Stories for more.